What if your biggest advantage is now your obstacle? In this episode, we are going to explore the hidden cost of clinging to outdated success and how to break free from the strategies, the mindsets, and the systems that no longer serve you. Are you ready? I know you are. So let's dig in. Welcome to Transformation Station Best in Class series. Today we're talking about from legacy to liability. And this conversation dives deep into the often unspoken tension that seasoned leaders face. You know what I'm talking about. That's right. The struggle between preserving what once worked and evolving to meet what is next. And our guests today, they are going to bring raw insight and hard-earned wisdom on how past victories can quietly, if you're not paying attention, become today's blind spots. Oh yes, this episode is a wake-up call for anyone leading from muscle memory, applying old tools to new problems, and wondering why momentum has stalled. All right, so we're going to get into it. And before I bring on our guest today, I want to introduce them. We have Orville Brissett, who is a pastor, a keynote speaker, a leadership consultant with over 2 decades of military pastoral experience. He is the founder of OSB Coaching and Consulting and the senior pastor of the Church of the Oranges Seventh-day Adventist Church in Orange, New Jersey, and the host of the Resilience Room. And we also have Gamal Alexander, who is a speaker, educator with over 20 years of experience helping leaders communicate with clarity, confidence, and impact. His background spans corporate training, higher education, ministry, and comedy, all of which inform his dynamic approach to storytelling and public speaking. At this time, it is my honor to welcome to Transformation Station Best in Class series, Orville and Gamal. Welcome, welcome, and welcome.
Wow, great to be here. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for having me. You mentioned this is the best in class, and yet you've got me on. So I don't know how the two link up, but we're going to make it work anyway. I'm glad to be here.
So glad to have both of you. And I'm really excited about this conversation because this is, to me, another one of those classic evergreen topics that many times, you heard me say it at the beginning, that we don't talk about as leaders, but many times it's felt and we're living through it. And today we're going to give a voice to it. That's right. We're talking about from legacy to liability. Now, I was doing a little bit of research, Gamal and Orville. And, you know, when we talk about legacy, we talk about wanting to know that we have built a strong foundation, right? Wanting to know that as a leader, over the years, we have been inspirational and motivational. Wanting to know that when our time is over, there are those who are going to stop and they're going to say, let me tell you what Gamal said. Let me remind you of what Orville did. He came and built that church up. He came and he wrote 500 books that I still read today, right? We want to have a legacy while we're still leading many times. And yet the reality that many of us experience when we've been in the game for a long time, because again, we're talking to the seasoned leader today, right? We've been in the game for a long time. Sometimes we can become a liability. So I'm going to start off with this question, right? Many seasoned leaders, at times, they will rely on what has worked in the past. So Gamal and Orville, like, how can a seasoned leader tell the difference between legacy that supports growth and habits that are now holding them back? What are your thoughts? Orville?
Well, one of the keys to what we're talking about right now is knowing the people that you are leading. A lot of organizations get turnover, whether it's generational or or transitional. So you may have a series of leaders who transition from one context. You may have leaders who come from a different generation, who have a different worldview. And when we talk about this whole notion of sticking with something that has worked as opposed to something that's now become a liability, you have to be willing to identify what sticks to the wall and what falls off the wall. So when we talk about that, we're talking about, okay, it worked when we had an infrastructure in which we ran everything through a strategic plan and process. That worked in one setting, but you may get a series of leaders who that doesn't work for. And one of the things that I have tried to be sensitive to is that if the person with the least amount of education can't understand where you're going, then you have to check the system. You got to check the infrastructure. The person with the least amount of education, the least amount of experience, has to be able to articulate and understand in one or two clear sentences where you're headed as a leadership team. And so it's the whole thing about being sensitive to observing what sticks to the wall and observing what falls off the wall, and what sticks, keep it, what doesn't, readjust.
To add to that, there's a quote you're familiar with, but it bears repeating: you either die a hero or you live long enough to become the villain. Uh, and I understand that to mean that leadership and life go through seasons. And there will be a season where you are the hero, where your message is connecting, where everything is working, where your methods are just about mythical in their effectiveness. And then there will be other seasons. Here is my approach, here's my perspective. As a leader, as a communicator, I have come to expect that my leadership will not be evergreen.
Mercy.
Okay. I've come to expect that my communication will not be evergreen, that there will be times, particularly at the beginning, but there will be ebbs and flows. There will be times where I am wildly effective, where the crowd is chanting my name. And then there will be times when what I did yesterday isn't working today. And if I expect that I will go from hero to villain on occasion, then I know what to look for and I know how to remedy the problem when it comes.
Mm. This is go ahead, Orville. Go
And
ahead.
I think there, as Gamal was saying, there's also a self-awareness component, right? So when we talk about having effective leadership, you got to ask yourself, are you a transformational leader? Are you a transitional leader? Or are you really a toxic leader? Right? There's just kind of three T's we have to ask ourselves. And transformational leaders help inspire growth and culture. They motivate people to want to become, their better selves, to be able to stretch themselves and to look beyond the surface, to be able to do or accomplish things they haven't accomplished before. Transformational leaders build morale. Transformational leaders help organizations to achieve new levels. Transitional leaders, they're there for a time period. They might be the bridge between before and next. And so their job is to kind of be a placeholder. And oftentimes that's where managers often find that's their niche as transitional. They're not really they're not gonna catapult. They're not gonna jump over the fence, but they're not gonna drive you into the ditch either. But then toxic leadership is where you have to ask yourself these very probing questions, because a leader's leadership dynamic can be a liability when their actions, decisions, behaviors harm the organization's bottom line, harm the organization's performance and the culture and the reputation. And so as Gamal's kind of talking about this, being aware that you're not evergreen, you have to have some self-awareness. What type of leader are you, or what type of leader are you hoping to be?
So So here in the Best of Class series, as we're doing the episodes, the podcast, we always like to give our leaders a moment of reflection. And, this is a really good moment to just kind of stop and do a self-check, right? So first, we have this question that we see up. Are you a transformational, transitional, or toxic leader? This really is a great assessment question that every leader should periodically ask themselves with no judgment. We're just looking for facts, no feelings, right? I mean, there have been times where I have been the transitional. You talk about you're just there for a season. You're there to get the team through something in particular. You're not there to leave a legacy, right? You're not there to be anybody's friend. You're just there to do a job, and then you're gone. And you have to wrestle with that also at times to make sure that your mindset keeps focused on what is important and nothing else, what matters, what we're focusing on right now. And then there's times where I've had the joy of being that transformational leader, right? Where you get a chance to get in and inspire and motivate and push the team. And it's great. It's wonderful. And there's been a couple of times where I've been a toxic leader, because partially I wasn't focusing on the main thing. I was focusing on other things. And I know in one situation, I didn't realize that I was the cause. I was seeing everybody else as the cause, right? Until somebody had an honest conversation. I was like, oh, wait a minute, it's me, right? And so those of you who are listening and watching right now, I want you to just go ahead and ask yourself, are you a transformational, transitional, or toxic leader? Great point of assessment. And don't just ask yourself, but I'm going to invite you to write it down. Write down the question and write down the answer. And find another leader that you trust, that you can talk this through with. As both of you were talking, I was thinking about this leadership principle that says, if your systems can't thrive without you, it's not a legacy, it's a liability. Over the years, as I've been in organizational leadership, I've had several leaders that have said to me personally, if your people can't get the job done when you're not around, that's a problem. And I've always remembered that, because when you have that mindset, Gamal and Orville, you are then coaching and you're mentoring and you're empowering your team to be successful, as opposed to you being the success. Gamal?
Absolutely. So when you bring home the box from IKEA, or when the furniture comes through the mail in Amazon, and you open up the package, what's the first thing you look for in order to put it together? In order to put the system together, you look for the instructions.
Yes.
There is something that's been communicated on paper that hopefully is clear enough, and it's complete enough, and it makes enough sense. It connects with you enough where you can follow it and you can perpetuate the system. You can reproduce what's been meant to be reproduced. And if you can't because the instructions are not clear, or if you can't because the instructions are missing, or if you can't because somehow the instructions are over your head, well, then you're going to be left with pieces, but you're not going to have much of a system or a product to speak of. And as it is in IKEA, so it is in life, so it is in leadership. If you cannot communicate a clear vision, if you can't leave those instructions for your partners, your subordinates to unbox, if you will, and to follow in your absence, if you can't leave instructions for a successor in the future to unbox in your absence, then you're going to see all of your hard work fall apart. Vision is not just for today. Those instructions are there for tomorrow. Whether the package takes 100 years to get to you in the mail, or whether the package comes in overnight delivery, so long as it has those instructions, you ought to be able to follow them and carry on. And often we have the complete instructions in our head, but we've written down in shorthand. how someone else should be able to follow along, or we haven't written something down at all, or we've written it down in another language. And how frustrating is it to unbox the item and to get the instructions in Spanish when
Mm.
you barely have a grasp of the English language? There's
Mm,
no way you can carry out that vision. And a lot of organizations have done that, not realizing that if you're interested in legacy, that you're really interested in effective communication. Everything rises and falls with it.
so
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
so Adrian, like, and Gamal says it so great. I'm sitting here thinking about what causes turnover in organizations. What part does leadership really play? So, for example, in 2020, the Society for Human Resource Management published this data point, and they were just basically like 58% of people left a job citing poor leadership management or toxic culture as a reason. So there was something happening at leadership level that was hindering the ability to progress, that was hindering the ability for people to really excel in what they were brought there for. And a lot of times what we discover is people are not really sure about what their vision is. They've started businesses without a really clear picture. I like to use the example of Chick-fil-A versus Fubu. So I'm gonna give you the Cliff Notes version. Fubu was, in the 90s, early 2000s, a urban brand founded out of New York by some guys who had a desire to have a Black clothing brand. It really hit hard in the Northeast in urban markets. People were wearing Fubu. Eventually, it was bought by another company, by Sean John. But after about 7, 8 good years, you started to find Fubu in clearance bins. You started to find their stuff for sale on eBay for next to nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you got Chick-fil-A, who doesn't really have a binder of a culture model, but their culture is infectious to the extent where everywhere you go, every Chick-fil-A has the same model. Every
Mm-hmm.
Chick-fil-A looks the same. Every Chick-fil-A, the culture, the personality, the customer engagement, it's all got the same energy. That's because Chick-fil-A is clear about what they do. Chick-fil-A
Yes,
is clear that their focus is not just local, it's national. Fubu
yes.
missed it. Fubu was only focused on regional and not national. And so when other clothing brands started to come up and marketing started to expand, Fubu could not keep up.
Mm.
They could not keep up. It's like the difference between you guys were all around the same age. It's the difference between Yugo and
Yes.
Hyundai. Yugo and Hyundai, right? Yugo couldn't keep going with the times, but Hyundai kept evolving to where
Yes.
now Hyundai is a major brand, and they added Genesis to it, right? And so
Yes.
for a lot of leaders, what their problem is, they don't really know what their vision is, and they're not thinking about how do I pivot when what I thought was my vision is no longer it.
Mercy.
They I'm a pastor in a church context. I see this all the time. It's this thinking that we have all the answers because we're a church. Well, no, the
Mm.
community really tells us where we're at, and not us telling the community where they are. The community's
Mhm.
ebbs and flows, the socioeconomic factors, the educational dynamics happening, the public school system and the challenges that exist, the crime demographics, all of that tells us where we are. But at the
Mm.
moment where we start thinking it's just where our address is, we lose sight of the big picture. And a lot of leaders, that's where their legacy stops, and they become liability
Absolutely.
when they stop realizing that the world is more than just their immediate bubble.
Absolutely. If you are in leadership, you're in the driver's seat.
Mhm.
You're in charge of operating the motor vehicle. You can control the wheel. You can turn right, you can turn left, you can go front, forward, you can even reverse. You can't control the road.
Mm.
There can be obstacles, there can be traffic, there can be construction. You might have to take detours. You can't control the weather. Weather can make your trip treacherous, The weather can make your trip very pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of outside factors that you're just going to have to accept will change.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to have to be adept enough to adapt. That's what effective leadership is all about. And for those who insist on following their route, their game plan, in spite of construction, in spite of traffic, in spite of the weather, in spite of the detours, you're going to find yourself not going very far.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to find yourself very frustrated. You're going to have passengers asking you, are we there yet? Over and over again. You're not going to have good news for them because you were not adept enough to adapt. That is an integral, a critical part of leadership, the flexibility and the humility to
Mm-hmm.
not make it me centered, to
First.
not make it about your destination, your vision, your progression, your promotion, but
Mm-hmm.
rather to make leadership about getting the organization to the destination. I
Mm-hmm.
need to get the car from point A to point B. And I've got the skills to do it in spite of the weather, in spite of the traffic, in spite of the road. Why? Because I'm a good driver. That's
Hey.
all a leader really is, a really good driver.
Mm.
Yeah. And so as a leader, and for anybody listening, watching, so it's not perfection or talent that builds the legacy of a leader. It's authenticity and character.
Mm-hmm.
So as a leader, I I play a major role. I'm going to use some corporate language here. I play a major role in the rise and fall of my stock prices,
Mm-hmm.
of my stakeholders' loyalty. I play a major part. If as a leader, if I'm narcissistic, if I'm do as I say do, and if I'm very oppressive in my leadership, then I'm going to witness the drop in loyalty to my organization,
Mm-hmm.
because nobody wants to be part of an organization where they are oppressed. But if I'm
Right.
authentic and at the moments that I don't know, I'm using the skill sets around the table to help get those answers solved, to get
Mm-hmm.
those problems solved, excuse me, then my leadership team says, well, it's not about him, it's about us achieving this together.
Mm-hmm.
And so many organizations, whether you are in a faith-based context, whether you are in a corporate context, whether you're
Mm-hmm.
in a nonprofit context, whether you're in an athletic context, we have all seen sports teams that have horrible cultures. Nobody wants to play for them, nobody wants to work for them, nobody wants to be a part of them, because they make decisions that make the atmosphere more of a liability. But you also seen organizations where everybody wants to be a part of. Man, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know a person, and we're all got the same kind of background here. I don't know a person who was like, I don't want to play for the Yankees. I
Right.
don't know
Right.
a person who was like, I'm going to turn down this contract from the Yankees. The Yankees have a culture where people want to play for them.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's where people want to be. At the Lakers,
Mm-hmm.
people want to play for the Lakers. I mean, that's just the reality. And what happens is, it doesn't mean that everything about the leader is perfect. It's just that it's got a culture that inspires me to want to be part of this, because I
Yes.
can be my best self here. And so it's not perfection, it's not talent, it's character and authenticity that builds legacy. One of my great influencers or influences is a man by the name of C.E. Bradford. Many of you don't know who he is, but C.E. Bradford, he had the ability to be extremely effective while being comical. He did it in such a way where you wanted to follow this guy. He was incredibly intelligent. He knew how to bring people along. He knew he didn't have all the answers, but he knew how to get the answers to the problems he faced. And so I think as we are now having in the workplace 4 to 5 different generations, depending on
Yes.
where you're still working. I
Yes.
mean, it's important to use these generations to help you achieve your why. Yeah, you get.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Gamal said it so clearly, so I don't want to, repeat what he's saying. But I think, we're talking about having a leadership that's legacy, is also remembering not to build it on reputation, but to build it on inspiration.
Yeah. And what you said right there, that's really key when you're talking to the seasoned leader, right? Because there are so many things that happen in the midst of doing and being that sometimes can rob you of that inspiration. A couple of quotes I want to share with us right now. One, legacy honors the past while clearing space for the future. Liability clings to comfort disguised as tradition. I'm going to say that one more time because that right there is serious. Okay. Legacy honors the past while clearing space for the future. So, leaders, right now, I'm inviting you to just take a moment and think about how are you honoring the past while at the same time simultaneously clearing space for what shall be. Liability clings to comfort disguised as tradition. So when we're talking about how do I know if, I'm still in legacy mode or liability mode, are you clinging to tradition? Both Gamal and Orville have both were kind of talking about being, a leader who is just you're focused on what was and what has always worked, and you don't move from that model. You do not open the space or the door for the what can be, right? And here's another quote for us that says, leadership evolution begins the moment we stop defending what used to work and start designing what's needed now. And Orville and Gamal, from a faith perspective, I have found that when I'm leading and doing the Lord's work, the Lord makes room and brings in what is needed. I have to put pride to the side. I have to be willing. One of you mentioned the word humble, right? I have to be humble myself, and then step back so the Lord can bring in what is needed. And he has a way of inspiring, of motivating, of causing that legacy platform to get rooted and set even more than I could ever try. So before I ask you guys this next question, I just want to take another reflection moment for our leaders. Self-check. Ask yourself these questions. What do I consistently protect, even when it no longer serves the team? What have I confused habit with wisdom? Where have I confused habit with wisdom? So 2 questions, reflection questions. Leaders, I want you to focus on right now. What do I consistently protect when it no longer serves the team? And I'm going to invite you to say, well, even when it no longer serves me, make it personal, right? And where have I confused habit with wisdom? So Gamal and Orville, I want to ask you this question because leaders need to hear from you. Have either one of you ever had a moment where something that once brought you success stopped working? And how did you realize that it was time to evolve, time to shift?
Oh, absolutely. I My preaching stopped working,
Mm,
and it was time for me to evolve. It's time for me to shift. I am a child of the '80s who grew up in the '80s and '90s, went to Oakwood in the '90s, and I was introduced to and fell in love with a certain type of communication. My earliest roots as a communicator were in the church.
mm,
And when I was exposed to uh, these incredible communicators, as I saw them, and their particular style of communicating, I found myself enthralled, and I also found myself adopting their style. I wanted to learn everything I could about the now Senate chaplain, Barry
mm,
Black.
mm,
And I wanted I wanted to present and talk just like Charles Gilchrist Adams. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted the soaring oratory of a Gardner Taylor. These are names that might not mean anything to our listeners now, but trust me, they meant something, especially to a young minister way back when.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I even unearthed the prayers of Peter Marshall so that I could so that I could study that wordplay. What I found, however, is
Mm-hmm.
that language and life continue to evolve. And we move from the cassette tapes that I used to listen uh,
Mm-hmm.
to YouTube and Instagram and TikTok. And then the TED Talk began to sweep the nation. And communication took on a very different turn, a turn I wasn't familiar with, a turn that wasn't always accepted or respected in
Mm-hmm.
circles where I was trying to be an effective communicator.
I
You
see.
don't deliver TED Talks in small Baptist churches. You don't deliver TED Talks in small Black Seventh-day Adventist churches.
Right, right.
But what I realized was that if I wanted to be an effective communicator for tomorrow, I needed to reinvent myself and develop a different skill set.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some universal skills that I can develop? What's a universal language I can learn how to speak so that as I'm speaking to a more varied audience, because YouTube reaches everybody, as I'm speaking to a more multicultural audience, because TikTok reaches everybody, as I am now looking into a camera and delivering rather than always delivering on stage,
Mm-hmm.
how do I develop those skills? And so I had to go back to school, as it were, not to get another degree, but to go back to the school of life, to go back to the school of communication and start looking into storytelling. And I
Mm-hmm.
had to start, which is what drove me to stand up comedy. Uh, I don't have the story where I saw the Kings of Comedy one day and I was just so blown away by Bernie Mac, I thought I could be funny too. Far from it. This is about survival. It's about me learning how to talk to people in different circles who may not want to hear what I have to say, and
Mm-hmm.
learning how to craft a message that's so effective that they don't recognize that my hair is in a ponytail.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I want to be that effective. And I would encourage any leader who plans to be leading tomorrow, right? If you plan to be leading today, well, then what you're doing and the way you're doing it is just fine. But if
Mm-hmm.
you plan to be leading tomorrow, you're going to eventually have to go back to the school of hard knocks because another degree might not take you there. Another certification might miss the mark. You're going to have to go back to the school of experience. You're going to have to go back to the school of listening to your clientele. You're going to have to go back to the school of solving problems. You're going to have to go back to the school to people university. And you're going to have to let them help you develop the skill set that you'll need to be effective tomorrow. I know that tomorrow I'll need to be more of a storyteller and less of a hooper. Half of y'all don't know what that is. The other half is I had to scratch your head to remember the term. Don't
Mm-hmm.
worry about it. Just if you're in the 1% that remembers what that is, just know that that may not be effective tomorrow. And so I'm going as a communicator, I'm going to have to figure it out, and not just in the preaching bubble, but in the communication world. Because as an educator, it's changing.
Mhm.
As a coach, it's changing.
Mhm.
As a leader, it's changing. And let me tell you something, you'd better be ready, willing, and able to change right along with it.
Yes, yes, that is powerful right there. Thank you so much for sharing real time relevance when it comes to this topic of knowing when to evolve. Thank you so much, Orville. What about
Yeah.
you?
So though I've had a number of experiences. One of the earliest leadership adjustments, my leadership administrative portfolio had to shift. Coming from the military to pastoral ministry, it had to shift because now I was no longer leading soldiers, sailors for life survival, mission readiness. Now I was dealing with staff who were mainly volunteers, and so that was an adjustment. But most recently, the thing that really was a change for me in terms of moving from habit to wisdom, or confusing the two rather, I had the opportunity to serve on the board for Habitat for Humanity when I was pastoring in Cincinnati. And the ability for that group of people to solve large problems in a small amount of time under a strategic plan was life changing, was leadership changing for me. Whereas in the context similar to Gamal's, growing up in an African American church context, and that being really the substance of my leadership dynamic. And, things can take a little longer sometimes because a lot of people have a lot to say around the table. Um, you get into these spaces of Habitat for Humanity where they're solving major problems, people needing places to live, and they're solving how to grow influence and how to grow investors in an hour meeting. We only met once a month, and we're sitting here, and we've got this thing laid out. We're broken up into teams, and we're solving different aspects of the puzzle, and we're bringing it back together to have a completed puzzle. And I took that throughout the rest of my ministry, pastoral ministry, and even into some of the other leadership spaces that I've been blessed to be in, to understand the necessity of always being ready to grow, always being ready to pivot, not being the one with all the answers at the table, not being the one to have my thumb on every part of the process, but rather allowing people to take their individual strengths
Mm,
and help and allow them to complement my weaknesses.
mm,
So now I pastor the largest church I've ever pastored. On a weekly basis, I see about 650 people. And so I'm always meeting new people. It's a lot of transition going on. I'm always meeting new people. And I tell people all the time when they ask me how I'm doing, I tell them I'm doing fine. But the reality is, I don't know half of what goes on the church calendar. I stopped looking at it. Why? Because I have people who know how to do that. I have people who manage the church calendar. I have people with processes who okay stuff. I don't have my thumb on the finances. I could care less as long as I'm not broke. When I look at the monthly numbers, as long as I'm not hemorrhaging money, as long as people aren't complaining that they don't know where their tithes and offering is going, I'm fine with it. So I discovered, moving from smaller leadership context to larger leadership context, that I was allowing habit to be confused as wisdom, when
I see.
real wisdom was being able to let go of habit so that I could do leadership in a more productive way rather than in a passive aggressive format. And so my leadership style has changed. Now I don't have nearly, I don't know, I don't micromanage like I used to, and I'm forever adjusting. You all probably don't know this gentleman, but he just retired as the pastor of the New Psalmist Baptist Church in Baltimore, Maryland. Bishop Walter Scott Thomas Sr. served there for 50 years. And one of the reasons he lasted so long was because he always had his finger on the pulse of where his community and his church, and he always transitioned with it. And I think for the leader that's out there wanting to establish legacy and longevity, you got to be willing to make those adjustments and realize it's not about you, it's about the organization. And one of my influences, who's still today one of my big influences, his name is Freddie Russell. He is the principal of the True North Leadership Group. he instilled in me early that you start preparing for your successor on day one. So I've already began to plant the seed into my associate that I don't have to be around for her to be able to know how to do stuff, and that, God forbid, I'm out for an extended period of time, she can continue to lead the church as the church's associate pastor.
Yes, yes, yes. This is some serious wisdom right here. So, Gamal, I want to ask you this question, because there are leaders that are listening right now, they're watching right now, and they're saying, okay, I hear it, I feel convicted, but I don't know how to take that step towards this, right? So what is one powerful practice or mindset shift that will help leaders to move from "this is how I've always done it" to "okay, I recognize what's needed now"?
We succeed and fail through our stories. Whether it's the stories we tell others, or whether it's the stories we tell ourselves. I get to put my educator hat on now because I serve as an adjunct professor of communications. And I get the privilege of teaching all the communications courses, whether it's career communications, group communication, interpersonal communication, public speaking. What they don't know is that they teach me about as much as I teach them. And they've reinforced this for me. We succeed and we fail based on our stories we tell others, and stories we tell ourselves. If the story you tell yourself as a leader is that I have to preserve the safety of this by preserving its tradition, you will find yourself unable to move forward. You'll find yourself unable to transition
Mm,
or transform. You'll find yourself unable to prosper. We succeed or we fail based on our stories, whether it's the stories we tell ourselves or the stories we tell others. We first have to tell ourselves that ships are safest at the harbor, but that's not what ships were made for.
mm.
Ships were made to sail.
Mercy.
And whether those waters are stormy, whether those waters are choppy, or whether those waters are smooth,
Mhm.
if I have the skill set as a sailor, and I'm talking to Navy individuals now. So if I've developed the skill set as a sailor to be able to navigate whatever water and the trust in the system, the plan, and the one who guides me,
Mhm.
well, then I can take that ship into any waters and know that I can effectively get it from point A to point B. So
Yes.
I don't lead from a position of fear because that's not the story I tell myself. I don't lead from a position of preservation because that's not the story I tell myself. Once I've told myself the story, that I don't need to preserve tradition to remain safe. That I don't need to prevent progress in order to prevent disaster. That I can leave the harbor and sail off into uncharted territory. I'll
Yes.
still be okay. Then the story I tell others, the people I'm leading, the organization that I shepherd, the story I tell others is that I've received the vision, I have the instructions, I have the roadmap, and I'm inviting you to follow me on this journey. It's
Mhm.
we'll have our ups, we'll have our downs, but together we will
Mhm.
make it safely. This is
Mhm.
why we need to go. This is where we are going, and by God's grace, we're going to get there. This is
Mhm.
why we need to go. This is where we are going, and by God's grace, we need to get there. You'll find that if you can tell yourself a story that quiets fear, and if you can tell others a story that inspires trust, your leadership is going to be transformational and your leadership is going to stand the test of time.
I love that. As you were talking, I was thinking about Brené Brown, who says clarity is kindness, right? So you
Absolutely.
lead and you can provide clarity to your organization, to your team, to yourself, then that gives you the open space that you need to not be a liability, but to have the foundation there to open up the door for legacy, for change. Reminds me of a mindset or a practice that I was thinking of is celebrate learning, not just results, right? As leaders, when we focus on results, that's closed. But when you celebrate learning, then you give your mind permission to be curious, right? You give your team permission to be innovative. People don't feel like, oh my gosh, if I try and I mess up, oh, he's gonna be so mad at me, or I'm gonna lose my position. Nobody's gonna trust me again. That's not the culture that you want, whether it's in your church, even in your home, or in your organization, right? You want to celebrate learning. We are here to learn. I try to remind my staff, I remind myself, and I remind my staff, we have a mantra that says, we don't strive to be perfect, we strive to be progressive. And I invite my team to know I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to keep on learning, keep on growing. If we make a mistake, we have conversations. What lesson did we learn? We have a team conversation, right? Whether it was one person that made the mistake or the team. One person made the mistake, the team is going to accept responsibility and accountability for that, right? So we want to celebrate learning, not just results. And we have another quote that says, curious leaders don't fear change. They stay in conversation with it. Conversation, communication, clarity, those C's, right? Conversation, communication, clarity. Curious leaders don't fear change. So, leaders, you're listening, you're watching, don't fear change. Just stay in conversation with it. So, Orville, we have turned the corner. We're going to wrap things up with you. I want to ask you this question. Orville, speak to us today. How can leaders honor their legacy while making room for innovation and next generation leadership? We're talking to the seasoned leader today. How can leaders honor their legacy while making room?
So thank you, Adrian. So first of all, every leader who's paying attention to this today, it didn't start with you and it's not going to end with you. You are playing a part in a bigger picture. And so what happens along the journey is you're going to find moments where you're going to do exceptionally great and moments that are challenging. You're going to find out that as the culture shifts, one of the things I had the opportunity to do a few years ago was to teach world religions in undergrad. And certainly when you are exposed in that classroom to world religions, you're also exposed to various worldviews. And what worldviews and world religions help teach you is that you are really not as exposed and learned as you think you are. Right? You're at a very small place. And so the advantage of it is that you get to learn a lot coming from a small place. Leaders who are willing to admit that they've got more to learn, that there's more growth take place, and will allow themselves to be in touch with their weaknesses while they're using their strengths, will find great opportunities. One of the places that I never thought that I would excel in my leadership, it just seems to be the commonplace for me, is in conflict resolution organizationally. For some reason, God has placed it in my toolkit to stand in the middle of organizational conflict and help to navigate the weeds of it and come out better as a people than we were going into it. And so if we're going to prepare for the next generation, we do have to provide a self-awareness of our strengths and our weaknesses. We also have to we have to admit that there comes a point when we are probably not the best person to carry the next leg of the race. It's a story I don't tell often, but I will tell it briefly, in that my transition from my last church to this church was because I was convicted that where the church needed to go, it's not that I couldn't do it, but I wasn't the person to do it. My time had come to a close, and it was time to pass the baton to a younger pastor who had a pulse that I didn't have. But at the same time, it was my entryway into a context where I was the younger person who was going to have the opportunity to carry the baton, another leg of the race from my predecessor. And I'm saying it's coming to a place where you can be okay with the organization continuing to be healthy, even if you're gone. But what you allowed to take place was the seed or the groundwork to be able to take that organization higher after you go. Transformational leaders aren't worried about what happens after they're gone, because their work was so satisfactory that the organization will continue to thrive. For every leader that's feeling like the organization can't go on without you, or you don't know what else you're going to do if you leave the organization, I would like to encourage you to begin to think about the different skill sets that you already have in your toolkit, and begin to have this real reflective moment of figuring out where you can also be productive in other spaces, but allow now for the futurist, the Gen Z, the millennial with several certifications, for the young person coming out of college who uses AI well in the secular and corporate spaces, even in the faith-based space. Move aside, allow them to contribute and to deposit that which they have to help make an organization better. We don't make an organization great on our own. It is the sum total of a lot of people's deposit and interaction and engagement that help organizations to grow. The United States military hasn't been around this long because of just Ulysses S. Grant.
Yes.
The United States government hasn't been around this long just because of George Washington, right? And so everybody plays a part in helping to make an organization great. And at some point, you do have to move out of the way, and better to move out of the way voluntarily than involuntarily.
1,000%. To
So I want to. That's I want to add to that. Once again, we succeed, we fail based on our stories. Stories we tell ourselves, stories we tell others. Uh, there is such a thing as a tone. Um, Orville described Charles Bradford, who blended leadership with diplomacy and humor, and was able to move people along. How does that connect with this? Because in order to lead effectively, you'll need everybody, and you'll need to bring everybody along. And so, if the seasoned are telling the novice that they're not ready and they're never needed, well, then there'll never be a progression. If the novice tells the seasoned that they are in the way and they are obstructing justice, then we'll have no wisdom, and we'll end up with no direction. The fighting force, the military, to further the analogy, is made up of 20 somethings, but the Joint Chiefs is not 24. There is a combination there. And if we can tell ourselves the story that we are all in this together, and that every spoke in the wheel is necessary in order to make this thing go. And if we can tell others the stories that you are all needed, whether you are full of energy and low on experience, or whether you're high on experience and low in energy, you're all needed. If we can tell those stories effectively, then we can have organizations that are not only profitable now, but they're progressive and powerful into the future.
Ooh, This is rich. I'm going to share with you what I have gleaned from both of you. Here is my summary, right? Legacy isn't about preserving your methods. It's about passing on your mission in a way that evolves with the times. And that takes both humility and vision. And we have heard Orville and Gamal share these principles. And so to the leaders who are watching today, again, I invite you to, this is the reflection time, right? Take out your notebook, that note-taking device, and just sit down and take an assessment of what did you glean from this? What is speaking to you in this conversation about from legacy to liability and avoiding being a liability? And then what will you commit to today? We have an affirmation for you that says, I can protect my legacy and still evolve. Growth is not betrayal, it's stewardship. And we want to invite you to be good stewards of your leadership journey. So, how can you continue to evolve and be a good steward? Thank you so much, Gamal and Orville. This was absolutely an impactful and rich, I mean, like really rich conversation that I know that I need to watch this on the replay so that I can really hear, hone in, and reflect myself so that I can continue to grow as a leader. For those who are watching and listening, Orville and Gamal, if they would like to tap into your resources, your coaching, your podcast, your books, please tell us, how can we do that?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I too am going to go back and watch the replay because I just want to hear what Orville has to say. I can't get enough. I can't glean enough, and hopefully, it's a part of my personal growth plan. Hopefully, I get something more from it the second time around. If you feel the need to hear from me, I'll keep it simple. Amazon and Instagram. You can type my name in the Amazon, and there'll be a couple of books that I've managed to scribble out that will hopefully be helpful to you um, along your spiritual journey. I would love for you to have them. I'd love for you to share them. And then I'd love for you to tell me what you think about them. And so follow me on Instagram, Gamal.Alexander, and feel free to like, comment, direct message. It's actually me and not a bot. I'm not going to try to sell you anything. This is not a scam. You can communicate with me on Instagram. I'd be more than happy to hear from you. I welcome the communication. I am available for all types of speaking events, and I'd love to come and share with your organization. I love to come and share with you.
Thank you, Orville.
So you can reach me at on Instagram, OSB Coaching. You can reach me on Facebook, OSB Coaching and Consulting, as well as YouTube. I'm in the process of working on some course materials, some book materials that will be, I pray, will be impactful for every leader. It is going to be part of the resilience curriculum framework that also happens to go along with the Resilience Room podcast. That's every Tuesday at 12 p.m. I'll invite you to like, subscribe, and share all of those platforms. If you are interested for some reason that you want to hear something that happens from my church, then you can certainly tune in to www.cotosda.org. And prayerfully, you'll get some type of a devotional thought or something to help you to increase your health and your journey along the way, day by day. Thank you, Adrian, for this amazing time. Thank you, Gamal. Always great to sit at your feet. The quiet secret that nobody knows, and Gamal will never tell you, is that I actually got one of my first speaking experiences from Gamal way back in 2002. And so Gamal couldn't make a speaking appointment, and he sent me. And ever since then, I've just been trying to, grab a little bit of crumbs from the table from Gamal Alexander. And so I'm always grateful to be on with him. And Adrian, thank you for the wonderful work you are doing in this space, this transformation Station is amazing. It's life-changing. And I want each of you to make sure that you are telling somebody about the transformation station and coming on and gleaning and learning from Adrian Benton week after week. It's just amazing. Grateful to be here.
Thank you so much, brothers and gentlemen. We're so happy to have you. And Transformation Station community, we definitely will support Orville and Gamal. So you'll find their links in the description. Please go in, tap the resources, buy the books, listen to the podcast, and share so that we can continue to grow as a leadership community. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Truly appreciate having both of you. Thank you. All right. Well, there we have it. From legacy to liability. It is not just a title. It actually is a challenge. And I want you to remember that this episode has invited you to examine where you're holding on to too tightly to the past and where your next breakthrough might require a breakdown of what's always been. You don't have to choose between honoring your legacy and embracing evolution. Just move forward and keep on learning. Why? Because great leaders don't just leave a mark, they make room. All right. So until next time, keep on growing, keep on leading, keep on learning, and keep on transforming.